Okay, let's see how well we can get this going. All right. Looks like we're up. So, like I said, I'd like to address any of the confusions or questions that you might be experiencing regarding the feedback from assignment number 1. Who'd like to start? Yes, Dahlia. Excellent. Let's take a look at that. So we're starting with the speaking section, and we'll start talking about credibility. Dahlia, there you are. So Dahlia has volunteered to talk about, okay, the 3A's. So Parisha's talk that we all discussed yesterday about the 3A's of awesomeness and how you can take every little bit of your life to make you happy. Credibility. What we're talking about there is a result of everything that follows it. And I'm going to talk during this class period about how I was not entirely happy with the way this worksheet was organized and how I reorganized it for number 2. And I'll talk about how that might affect your grade and everything. But credibility, Dahlia and everybody else, is a result of everything else that follows: appearance, voice, body language, eye contact, use of media, response to audience. When you are assessing credibility, you are assessing how well the speaker instills confidence in his or her audience, or how poorly that person does it. Let me give an example of Dahlia's. Let's take a look at what she has written. Appearance, professional, business casual. His voice changes depending on what he talks about. Body language, he uses hand motions, walks around a little, looks at the audience most of the time, uses the screen and pictures, he jokes with the audience. Considering everything that you've said, how effective a speaker is he? Dahlia, talk to me. Is he an effective speaker? Yes, no, or maybe?
I think so.
Yes. So what makes him an effective speaker?
Like the audience that understands like what he's going through and they joke around.
Okay, so you remember points at which the audience is laughing?
Yeah.
Okay. And what are they laughing about?
Just like how funny he is, like what he talks about.
Can you give me an example of when they laugh at him?
I think it was when he was like describing, like when he had like the 10 viewers and the 12 viewers.
Oh, okay.
Laughing.
He said he had tens of views and people laughed. So it seems that he is able to engage the audience in humor. That's important. Very good. That doesn't really, saying he is passionate doesn't really address that. So Dahlia, let me state again what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to create sentences and statements that address how his delivery of his speech either instills or detracts from the confidence of the audience. Show you what I mean. Parisha is able to instill confidence in his audience first. Sorry, I'm not spelling incorrectly, just the keyboard's going out. First, through humor. The audience laughs with him, showing their relaxation and affection for him. Wow, look at my wireless keyboard. That's awesome. And by awesome, I mean awful. Okay. Come on, you can work. Fix this. Almost there. Noah. That's probably because you didn't share it with me as I asked you to. So, well, then we'll figure that out. Noah, just double check your sharing settings and make sure you're sharing it to my bex.net and you're spelling my name correctly and all that good stuff. And if not, we will troubleshoot it a little bit later, okay? So let's look at dahlias for a moment. Answer me a question. If you like me, are you less or more likely to listen to me? Correct. So if you laugh at my jokes, are you more likely to like me or less? Correct. So if I'm cracking Mia up, she probably likes me because I'm giving her happiness. Laughter is happiness. So when I make somebody happy, they like me. If they like me, they're more likely to listen to me. Dolly has just said that the interaction of the with the audience right here is based upon jokes. The fact that they're laughing shows that they're with him, they like him, and they're more likely to treat his ideas well. Does that make sense? So your credibility is an analysis of his speaking ability and how that instills or detracts from confidence in the audience. Make sense? Cool. That's probably not all you can write. You could write something else. Can you talk about another one of those criteria and how that affects his believability? You did response to audience. What else? Okay, what can we say about his eye contact?
Like if he's like looking at the eye, that's like the audience like knows he actually wants to talk to them.
Good. And does he give consistent eye contact? There you go. Can somebody tell me, we're going into detail, but can somebody tell me right now why my response just initially looks better than Dahlia's original response? Without even reading it, why does mine look better than Dahlia's original response? Andrew. Thank you very much. You want a principle of good writing, at least for this? I'm sorry, let me give you a caution. Just because you blabber on and on and on and on and on all the time doesn't mean you're writing well. But with this assignment, I found that just about everybody that wrote really short responses was losing points. Every time I opened a file that was expansive, had lots of words, generally that person was giving lots of detail, and that person was earning more points. Rule of thumb, and that means a rule that you should follow most of the time. For analysis number 2, write more. Dolly is brave enough to throw hers up there, so I'm sure she's able to accept some criticism. I look at Dahlia's section, I think, skimpy. We need more. I pull open something like Gabe's. I just take a look at it initially. I can be relatively sure that Gabe's about to earn a good score. Why? Simply because he's filling that space. Now, did he earn a perfect score? No. Sometimes he made some mistakes with what he was doing, or he didn't really get the point of what I was looking for. But he's expanding and adding detail. Let's get back to Dahlia's question at hand. Dolly is asking about credibility and saying, even after we discussed it in class, you still didn't get it. So let me summarize this. The credibility section is relating to the speaking. How well does that speaker instill or remove confidence from the audience? I should see words like confidence. I should see words like believe. I should see words like trust. And I should see you making reference to eye contact and to body language and to the voice and to the interaction with the audience. Virtually all of you made the same mistake that Dahlia did. So I'm glad that Dahlia leads with that question. That means I want all of you doing what I just did with Dahlia's. Go to your document, press enter right after your original credibility discussion, and expand. I'd like to see some more examples. So take a moment to do that, please. Okay, before I pull any randomly, would anyone like to volunteer theirs to see if they're doing it right? Kayla and Jacob, okay. Let's see. Kayla, where are you? There you are. Arredondo is able to instill confidence, instill confidence in the audience by being very sincere. She speaks to the audience like she is speaking to her students. Her voice doesn't waver, showing her confidence. Okay, that's an excellent start. And Michaela, my only concern is that you saying by being very sincere is a little bit vague. So you say sincere, and that's an abstract concept. I'd like you dealing in concrete measures. So how do I know that she's sincere? Does she seem to express that in her face? When we're talking about the 3 A's of awesomeness, and that man was describing the moment that his friend committed suicide and the moment that his wife said that she was leaving him. You could hear his voice stop, and you knew that he was really feeling those emotions, and that showed that he was sincere. So do you see what I'm talking about there? If you say sincere, that's great, but I'd like to see how exactly you know that. What is it that she does that shows that? So you're on the right track. Just be a little bit more detailed, and you're good. Make sense? Cool. And Jacob, you wanted that too. Oh, and we're talking about Rita Pearson. So we know about Rita. We've watched this talk. She has 40 years of experience, and her parents and grandparents did the same thing. Okay. Why is Jacob correct about what he's saying, but not on task with what I want? Shane.
Because he's saying right facts that would allow it to be credible, but you're saying you want us to expand on what we're saying. Right.
I'm saying that I want you guys to expand on what?
How much
On her speaking, not her identity. See the difference? I can instill confidence in you folks in a couple different ways. I could come up to you and I could say, hey, my name is Mr. Clarkson. I've taught in Sylvania schools for 10 years at 5 different grade levels. I've taught at the university level for an additional 10 years in these different subjects. I'm published here, I've done this, and I've done this. That's one way to instill confidence, right? That's my identity. That's my identity. Jacob's focusing on identity. Is that important? Absolutely. Is that part of speaking? Yeah. Identifying yourself? Yes. So Jacob's giving me some information that's really interesting and very relevant, but not what I'm looking for in the section. You know what? That's probably a fault of the assignment, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So what Jacob's writing is interesting information, but what I'm looking for is not the identity of the speaker, but I'm looking for the way that person speaks. We all watched Pearson, right? Can somebody talk to me about why she's an effective speaker? What is she doing that makes me want to listen to her? Remember, every kid needs a champion? Powerful voice, right? A powerful voice makes me want to listen to somebody and trust them. If I'm up here and I'm speaking like this and I'm speaking in kind of a mumbly, mousy voice, then nobody wants to listen to me ever or trust me. What else?
She was excited to make the audience excited.
Absolutely. When she's talking about saving kids and building relationships, you can see the smile on her face, you can hear it in her voice, that she's excited about that, and that excitement is contagious. We have 2 descriptions on why she's an excellent speaker. Somebody give me a third.
She walked around the stage, she didn't hide.
She doesn't hide, she owns her space. When a speaker owns their space, not like nervously running around, but when a speaker owns his or her space, then that speaker is instilling confidence in the audience. Andrew, was that what you were going to say? Okay, anything else? We've got 3 so far. Nothing else? Already, Jacob has enough. And look at what he's talking about. He's already writing. She has a powerful voice. And I want specific, concrete measures of the way that that person's speaking and how that relates to confidence. Concrete, specific. and more and more and more. I'm sure if Jacob was paying attention to what we were just talking about, he can probably fill about 3 to 4 lines on that document with detailed information about her speaking. Okay? So, and obviously he's doing that. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about credibility. Is that clear? Are there questions remaining on it? All of the rest of my comments in this section have to do with whether or not you have expanded. The short items, the little items, those are the ones that probably lack detail for me to understand what you're talking about. Let's move on to the argument section. Anybody want to ask a question about the argument section? Excuse me, claim, clarity, organization. Shane.
Oh wait, are we talking about like sound reasoning?
Yes.
Yeah.
The sound reasoning section.
I wasn't really sure what to do at all.
Understandable, a number of people received the same comment. If you look at somebody else's document and you say, hey, he typed the exact same comment for me. I know because I had a document of stock comments that I copied and pasted because many students were making the same mistake. Shane probably received a comment that many of the rest of you did. As part of sound reasoning, explain why the speaker's thinking works, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Shane, can you give me a quick description of this video? We haven't watched this yet, so talk to me a little bit about it.
It's Duckworth. She's trying to she's describing that to be successful in life, you have to have grit.
What does grit mean for her?
Be determined.
Excellent. So determination leads to success?
Yeah.
Cool. And let's look at the claim. In order to assess the reasoning, you start by looking at the claim. And I thought the claim was a little awkwardly worded, so I suggested that Shane rewrite to say something like, you should never give up on something you love. Shane, I haven't watched this video. Does that seem to accurately capture what she's arguing? She, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What evidence does she provide for that claim? Of? Okay. Well, let me back up, or Mason, you did the same thing, so. Oh, interesting. So she has a lot of survey data that she has personally conducted?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
She was a teacher to begin, and she dropped out of that to young adults.
So she's a psychologist that used to be a teacher.
Now she's on like another psychology or something else.
So she has psychological data showing the success bred by determination? Interesting. She has used psychological survey data to generate a conclusion. Does that make her conclusion reasonable, rational? Why? What kind of proof? Mm-hmm. Survey data. It's numerical, right? It's scientific, right? It's diverse, lots of different people. She has authority as a psychologist. The sound reasoning section of this analysis is where you talk about whether or not that person has provided logical proof for their claim. And I'm thinking Shane and probably Mason will say, yep, her reasoning is sound. You know why? Because she bases her conclusion on scientific data, not on her own personal experience. She bases it on surveys conducted over thousands of people with all sorts of different backgrounds. The more diverse your evidence is, the better your reasoning is. Let's think about Harbison for a moment. Harbison's arguing what? Can somebody remind me of the claim in I Listen to Color? What's he arguing? Luke? Everybody should be a cyborg. Excellent. And Luke, how many people's experience is he giving to prove that? One person's experience, his own. Thank you. So Luke, third question, you're doing excellent. Which is the sounder reasoning? The reasoning that draws from thousands of people's experience collected through scientific data, or one person's experience? Correct. And that's what I'm talking about with sound reasoning. You must think about whether or not your speaker's logic seems to work. And that's just one place where we could assess it. Some of you criticized Harbison's ideas by saying, you know what, he hasn't talked about whether or not you can walk outside in the rain with this thing. In other words, he's ignoring some data. And that could be a critique of his logic. So you can't argue for this conclusion when you've ignored all of these issues. You can't argue for this conclusion when you're only basing it on one person's experience. You could say, hey, this argument is totally emotional. There's no logic in it whatsoever. There's no evidence. Last class period, we were talking about hackers, and Gabe was talking about his speech where he said all this person did was breed fear, 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 fear of hackers. And there was no actual evidence given to his solution, that his solution would work about internet security. He's just making his audience afraid. That's not logic, that's emotion. When you're addressing sound reasoning, you must address how the speaker's brain works, how the speaker proceeds from evidence to conclusion, and does that leap work? We said it doesn't work with Harbison, and we're proposing that it does work here. All of you are dealing with different sorts of arguments and different sorts of speakers, so the answers to these questions will differ from speech to speech. This is, Jacobs. He's saying that her reasoning is sound because of the depth of her experience. 40 years of experience means that she has experience with many students or a few students? Many students. Does she have experience with the most difficult cases? She seems to. She says she does. So she has 40 years of experience, thousands of students, the most difficult cases. Just like the psychologist, she seems to be drawing a wide range of experience, so that means that her reasoning is probably pretty sound, right? Is that all that can be said about it? Maybe not. But what I would like all of you to do is to show me that you're thinking about how they're thinking. Is their reasoning working or not? Let's see, this is Michaelis. Yes, the argument is reasonable because she states a lot of evidence and I can sometimes relate to her situation. So there are two ways that Michaela is saying that it works. She's saying that this person has sufficient evidence, there is enough evidence, and I probably would have liked Michaela to expand on that a little bit, and I'll expect you to expand next time a little bit more, but she's at least showing me that she believes the reasoning to be sound because of the wealth of evidence. She's also saying that she believes the argument because she has personal experience that shows this conclusion to be true. So there are two ways in which Michaela is believing this person's argument. One's based upon the person's logic, the other's based upon her own experience. That was Shane's question initially, but does that answer and explanation help folks? Anybody still unsure about it and want to look at their example? Or do we want to move on to a different issue? Samantha. Sure. Do you want to look at the sound reasoning section on yours or some other section? Credibility? Okay, no, I don't believe he's right because we can both feel and think beauty. Richard is a little confusing on what he's saying. He's a little all over the place. We watched this yesterday. Seymour's talk about thinking or feeling beauty. Can somebody tell me why what Samantha is saying is valuable for this assignment, but it's not in the right place? Why does this not work for credibility right here, Dahlia?
I think it's more talking about the clarity than the credibility.
The clarity of his argument, right? So you're talking about whether or not he's making his ideas clear. Is that correct? And that belongs, Samantha, down here in clarity. See, and you said it kind of in clarity. He's confusing on what he's saying. And you might expand on why he's confusing, but that would be more to clarity. What you want to do is talk about how he's speaking. Talk about his body language. Talk about whether or not he seems to connect with the audience. Every once in a while he tells the audience, now stop. Do you remember those points during the talk? Stop. Stop thinking. He tells his audience to stop thinking, which the second you tell somebody to stop thinking, what do they start doing? Thinking, right? So he tells them to stop thinking, now feel. And now they're not feeling, they're thinking about feeling. But anyway. You talk about his tone of voice. You should talk about his body language. That's what you should focus on in that credibility section. I have a revision of this activity sheet, Samantha, that the next time you do it, it might make it a little bit clearer. But we'll continue to work on that. Dahlia. Uh-huh. Was this yours? Well, why not? What if I want it to be? Is this yours? Okay. I'll tell you why it's flawed just by looking at the sentence. What never appears in your sentence? What is the question asking about? If his reasoning is sound, right? If he is arguing well, if his reasoning is sound, what do I never see in your answer? No?
I?
No, but you're close. I don't want the I. I don't see him in there. You're assessing his reasoning, but you never talk about him. Who do you talk about? You talk about me, he's you, and you talk about other people, but you haven't talked about his reasoning. So do you see how you're focusing on his ideas rather than his reasoning? Does that make sense? So Dahlia, what you want to make sure to do is focus on him, use him in your sentence. Okay? Other questions? Let's talk about the next analysis. Go to your Share With Me folder and pull up TED Talks Analysis number 2. I will pull it up as well. Let's, what? Why not? How many of you don't have it? What? That's totally ludicrous. I'm going to take care of that right now. Okay, sorry about that. For some reason, Doctopus sometimes just sort of runs out of steam or energy at the end of the roster, and you guys are third period right at the end of the roster, and that's why it's happened. But all's taken care of. I'd like you to complete 2 tasks initially. At the top, I would like you to type number 2 next to TED Talk Analysis, if it does not already say that. Those of you that just received it, it probably already says TED Talk Analysis number 2. So make sure it looks like that, TED Talk Analysis number 2. And then type your name into it. We are short on time, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but let me explain up front what we're doing. I have revised this activity because I thought that it didn't work as well as I wanted it to, and I made some improvements. Some of your lost points for number 1 are not due to you not doing your work properly, but due to flaws in the assignment. So with number 1, instead of grading it out of 20 points, I have entered it out of 18. So if you earned a 17 out of 20, you actually just earned a 17 out of 18, which gives you an A. So your points don't change, but in other words, the numerator doesn't change, but the denominator changes. So I will change that in PowerSchool. It's not changed yet, but I will change it. But I'm not doing that for this next one because I fixed things and we've discussed it. Let's take a look. Everything remains the same up here. Don't forget, this is the time length of the video. That should be clear, and this is the date that it was recorded. This is new. I want you to give me a 2 to 5 sentence summary of the talk. So notice when I wanted to talk to Shane about his video, I first had to ask him for a summary of it. I want that in the assignment now. 2 to 5 sentences, just briefly summarize what the talk's about. Look at the speaking section. First of all, it has a title. Didn't have a title before. Secondly, it has a new item, vocal delivery. Pearson's vocal delivery was so awesome and relevant that I felt you should talk about the vocal delivery of your speaker. And then I got rid of that credibility label that was confusing some of you. And down here I've written, now that you have assessed a number of speaking criteria, evaluate the speaker's effectiveness. So that should be a little clearer. But what you wrote in credibility before should go there. And it comes at the bottom because it's the conclusion of that section. Otherwise, it's the same. This assignment is very much the same, but it's just a little clearer, I hope. Next is the argument section. Your claim. I've included instructions. Don't forget to use the word should or ought. For clarity, some of you talked about vocal clarity. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about clarity of ideas. Do we understand what that person wants us to take away? If not, why not? Sometimes somebody states their claim up front. Sometimes they state it in the back of the speech. You assess whether or not you understood what that person was trying to say, and then discuss that. Organization. I've given you some labels. We've talked about them in class. We might have talked about more, but there are some examples. Narrative. It's telling a story. Cause and effect. Compare, contrast, exemplification, process. These are types of organization. I'd like you to use words like this. And I'll provide some more help in class about that. We didn't get to it today. This is new. Evidence. I want you to list the evidence. I asked you to assess the evidence. Is it sufficient? Is it relevant? And I never asked you to list it. And then as I was thinking about that, I'm like, of course they can't assess it. They don't even know what it is because they didn't list it on the sheet. So list the evidence. And then you've got relevance and you've got sufficiency. Another new item, emotional appeals. How does the speaker try to stimulate an emotional response in you? And there could be multiple emotional appeals. And then finally, you've got effectiveness of reasoning, which was the sound reasoning idea before. The rating is the same at the bottom. I know we powered through that pretty quickly. Tomorrow, you will have time to work on it in class and on Friday, but it's due at the end of the class period on Friday. If you want to pick your video tonight, you're welcome to, or you could do it during class. One rule on picking a video, you are not allowed to pick a video that we have watched and discussed in class. So you can't pick that Thinking or Feeling Beauty. You can't pick the 3 A's of Awesomeness, and you can't pick Harbison's I Listen to Color, nor Pearson's Every Kid Needs a Champion. So pick something new. Sorry for the speed, but tomorrow we'll have time to talk about it in class as you work on it. Log out, put them back.